Hi everyone, Lawrence James here. Good morning. How are we doing? Now, I filmed a video yesterday and it took an hour and 10 minutes to film. And I made a crucial error, which is that I filmed it in 4K. It's nearly 30 gigabytes on my phone, and I have never felt so technologically disadvantaged in my life. So I've been unsuccessful in getting the video from my phone onto the computer. So I'm going to post the audio, and next time I have to be sure to make sure I get the video up and working.
Okay, hello. Lawrence James here. How are we doing? Good to see you. Well, I'm not seeing you. You're seeing me, but the sentiment is there, the most important part. And we have better audio in this second video as well. So you should be able to hear me nice and clearly, which is good. So this video, a little bit different to the first one. I've actually decided I'm going to jump straight into some of the content I'm going to be talking about on the channel and some of the value that we're going to be delivering. God, I hate that word, the value thing. I'll have to create a whole video about that. Goodness me. So yeah, this is all unscripted. This is all going to be raw. If it goes wrong, it goes wrong. You're going to catch glimpses of how my mind works, which can be very, very erratic, and you're going to see ideas pop in and out, and I'll vocalize them. Why? Because if I'm quite honest, I'm nervous. This is brand new. This is something that I am pursuing because I see that I have an important message and I want to get that across over YouTube and ultimately become a better content creator. I think that's important, but I'm not going to get there unless I get over this hurdle, this hump of talking to you guys through the little black box and staring at this little green light. It's not a human thing. It's a bit strange, so it's going to take some getting used to, and I appreciate the patience as I stumble over some words during this raw content. And I'll get better at editing in time, and the content will become much more engaging as I get better at it. So that's one, I suppose, of the two reasons that I'm creating this content on this Friday evening, 9:15. So good evening. The second reason is I wanted to start with something basic, something very, very simple that has a huge amount of impact on people's lives, especially because I've been talking about this stuff, by which I mean narcissistic recovery and understanding how narcissists' minds work, and not just that, but venturing into cults, cult leaders, groupthink, thought reform, cognitive dissonance, all of these sort of things that you learn about after you've had a personal experience, which in my case was marrying a young woman who was raised in a cult from when she was first born. And so that was about a decade ago now that I met her. And so since then, it's been very fascinating and captivating to me, and not always the most emotionally sound parts of my life. But I left that whole experience after marrying this young woman and separating after 3 years, and leaving what became a very, very coercive relationship, to having now nearly a decade of knowledge and a decade of understanding in all of this stuff, all of this mind control stuff. And I've used this to massively not just recover, but actually start to design a life that I really want and I'm really happy with and I'm really excited by, and actually look forward to creating this content and being with my friends and being with my family, etc. So that to me seems like a pretty common goal for a lot of people that are online, which is most people nowadays. And so I thought I'd make this content today. We're just going to do a bit of a deep dive, which practice for me and a boatload of information for you. If you have a toxic person in your life, or you struggle with toxic relationships, you find yourself going around in cycles or attracting the same sorts of people over and over again, then this video might be very helpful to you. Okay, now I'm going to get up on my computer. Let's jump in. We say that right. I'll I'll have to get used to that too. We're going to jump in. We're going to jump in and we're going to take a look at the DSM-5. Right. For those of you who don't know, the DSM-5 is the clinical literature for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for mental disorders, like cognitive problems, mental problems. And the bit that I'm going to zoom in on is in section, I don't know what this is, page 669, narcissistic personality disorder. And we're going to look at the diagnostic criteria. And what this will do is it's going to help you be able to recognize these sorts of people through their behavior and through a bit of insight as well as to how they think. The behavior obviously is what you're going to see, but how they think is what you're going to have in your mind and understand that. And of course, if you can spot and kind of diagnose a narcissist in your life, then you can defend yourself against these people and be wary and put those blockers up. Okay. And I might see as well that probably the bare amount of editing. I'll throw this on screen so you can see it. So let's jump in. First bit, diagnostic criteria, right? Now, there are 9 criteria on this list, and the DSM states that only 5 of these criteria have to be met in order for a diagnosis of NPD or narcissistic personality disorder in a particular individual. And the first item, I think, is actually probably is the most important. Has a grandiose sense of self-importance. And it says here, exaggerates achievements, talents, expects to be recognized as superior without commensurate achievements. In other words, they think they're better than they really are by some degree. And that in my experience, these individuals can vary by how much their delusion, and this is a delusion, it's a false self, a lie, a fake. Robert J. Lifton calls this the cult self. It's a false persona that they've created in their mind and become attached to. They see themselves in such a way that is inflated or much more so than what is generally accepted about them. So they might see themselves as the most beautiful person in the room, and whether this is collectively agreed upon or not, whether it's true, like they might be quite hot, they might not. From their perspective, the delusional aspect is that they think themselves much more so, and either their sense of self or the sense of self-importance is inflated from already being what most people would regard as pretty high, or they are pretty intelligent, or they are pretty beautiful, they are quite altruistic, even though that in itself is a falsehood, right? They've inflated that, and I call this hyperinflation, or whether there's a huge delusion differential, I guess, between how they see themselves and how other people see them. They might actually be but ugly, or might really cope with IQ, might really not cope with IQ, but they think themselves way up here and will constantly boast and will constantly exaggerate their achievements, talents. And here's the thing as well, like expected to be recognized as superior without actually having achieved those things. There's an expectation that you are also going to recognize these individuals as being better. And a lot of the time, they'll be quite taken aback if you don't recognize them as being superior. It's kind of like, oh, wow, you're supposed to recognize you're supposed to see how smart I am. I can't really understand why you don't see it, because it's so obvious to me, So number 2, this one is really quite hard to detect, but you can sort of see it in the way they talk about things. Now, it's a preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love, and like the perfect relationship or the perfect marriage or the perfect family or the perfect life, the white picket fence American dream kind of thing. They might fantasize about that, and these fantasies don't always stop at the dreams as well. Sometimes an individual with narcissistic personality disorder may actively seek unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, etc., etc., etc. Whatever it is that drives them, and usually it's one of these things. It's usually like it's usually somatic in the sense that it's about their body or the way they dress or the way they look. You know, their sexual allure. You get sexual narcissists who really do push the idea of beauty and attractiveness physically. You get the more cerebral folks who fantasize about their brilliance or their wit or their cleverness, and then most of them will somehow will somewhat fantasize about success and sit around dreaming about how successful they could be and all the amazing things that they should be recognized for. And as a result, of course, number 3, then they believe that they are special people. That is to say that they're above average, way above the common folk, and even that they can, here we go, they can only be understood by or should associate with other special or high status people. And then it says or institutions, but in my experience, most of the time it's high status people. There's a lot of name dropping with narcissists sometimes. Oh, I'm rubbing shoulders with this person and that person, and I'm like them, other special. Yeah, it's this other delusion that, because I see them as being beautiful or intelligent or successful, then because I'm rubbing shoulders with them, because I'm in their clique, so to speak, then I must therefore also be special in that same regard. They also require excessive admiration. Now, the DSM doesn't actually go into any more it goes into a little bit more detail further down the page, but on this diagnostic criteria, it just says requires excessive admiration. And I think it goes deeper than this. I think it goes really into an addiction. It is an attention addiction. These narcissists, they're like attention junkies. They have to get their fix. And it's not just admiration either. It is admiration, but it's also validation in some cases, and reassurance that they are beautiful and they are brilliant and they are this and they are that. Attention, likes, follows on and having lots and lots of people applaud them and congratulations, and it's an addiction. It's never going to be satiated. And I think this is an important point to bring up here, is that there is no end to the amount of attention, admiration, and validation that a narcissist needs. Not that they want it. It's not nice to have. They behave as if it is their lifeblood, is their fuel. They can't emotionally cope without this continuous flood of excessive admiration, validation, applause, congratulations, etc., etc., etc. And if you interrupt that supply, or you reduce it, or you threaten to cut it off, and this can be done, you've got to be really careful when you're trying to leave a close relationship with a narcissist, because the moment that you start putting in boundaries is going to be seen as a threat to these people, because they have this addiction, and you're their fixer. You're the means by which that validation is being supplied. And if you're threatening to cut that off, they're going to see that as an immediate threat, and they will respond very they can respond quite aggressively, very manipulatory. They can start to manipulate you even more. They can just become very withdrawn in order to try and invoke that attention in some other way. I think, or they just shut down, for example. So number 5, then, I suppose, this sense of entitlement. This is another good point. It says here, unreasonable expectations of especially favorable treatment or automatic compliance with his or her expectations. And I think the key here is automatic compliance. Okay, so the entitlement it isn't an entitlement unless you're expected to oblige, unless you're expected to comply without question. And this is how This is how you can start to see the similarities between narcissists and cult leaders. And really, in my view, there is no difference at all. They are one and the same. Every cult leader is narcissistic or has some form of cluster B personality. So it's this expectation that you are going to automatically comply without question. Okay, there's 4 criteria in every cult that makes every single cult. It's how you identify it. Has to have a leader, has to have psychology or psychological techniques in order to drive for obedience. That's the 3rd one. At the cost of the followers to the benefit of the leader. And that's the 4th one, right? So where a narcissist is concerned, there is an expectation that you will shower them with special privileges or special treatment or to be seen and behaved around as if they're different and special in some way. And this can be, I'll give a couple of examples of this, right? So this can be from expecting leniency when it comes to punishments, or it can be like even something simple like not having to queue. They don't want to queue up for something. They feel that they should be just let in. Like, I'm a special person, I'm a VIP. I should be like way ahead of all these plebs. Why am I lining up with the riffraff when I should be right at the front of the queue? That's how they think. Or it could be, and I noticed this one in personal experience and with other people that I've actually helped sort of coach or recover from narcissistic abuse from romantic relationships, and one from a workplace narcissist as well, is trust. It is just expected of you to trust them. And they might give you no reasons to trust them. In fact, they might actually break your trust all the time. But then they'll turn around and go, well, why don't you trust me? I can't believe you don't trust me. After all the things that I've done for you, why don't you trust me? I can't understand it. It's a delusion. It's that's this sense of entitlement coming in. It's the expectation that you should just trust them without any reason. And the thing that I think most of us are sort of familiar with when you hear narcissism or narcissist is the interpersonally exploitative, number 6, where they take advantage of others to achieve his or her own ends. Okay, they're manipulative people, and what this means is they use something's gone off there. They use subconscious psychology in order to indirectly influence you into doing their bidding or fulfilling their will. When we talk about manipulation, it is indirect. It is subconscious. Okay, sub meaning below, conscious meaning awareness. So it's below your level of awareness. You are not consciously aware that it is happening. Meaning, when you're manipulated, you don't know it's happening by default. If you did know that it was happening, you wouldn't be being manipulated. And so all narcissists will do this. All narcissists will manipulate you using this subconscious influence. And Stephen Hassan talks about this as well. Dr. Stephen Hassan talks about influence being on a spectrum, that destructive influence on one side is where one is influenced or coerced into doing something that doesn't benefit them or possibly even harms them for the benefit of the manipulator. There's also constructive influence where somebody can influence you positively, where the benefactor is you, such as a father influencing their son, who might have some inhibitions about attending football for the first time, and you take him to football, you take him to hurling, or you take him to Krav Maga, and he's a little worried about the first one, but you tell him he's going to have a great time, you tell him it's going to be wonderful, and he believes you. That's influence. He's believed you. You don't know that he's going to have a good time, but you tell him he will, and he goes in, and because he believes you, he makes that his reality, and he does have a great time. And he comes out and he says, "Dad, I had a great time." And I said, "Look, son, I knew you would. I knew you would. You want to go back next week?" He goes, "Yeah." So influence is on that spectrum, but narcissists are always going to be dealing in the destructive form of influence. Okay, it's the dangerous type, and it's subconscious, so you don't know it. You don't know that it is happening. And nor do they always. This is something that probably will ruffle some feathers, especially in the academics' mind, the people who have the degrees and the stamp of approval from the government to say that they can talk about this stuff. Is that they might not all know. It's definitely a common theme in the support groups and the survivorship groups online that they know what they're doing. They know that they're lying to you. They know they're trying to get you and they're trying to attack you. And look, let me tell you this. Narcissists are not out to get you. They're in it for themselves. Okay? They're only in it for themselves. At your expense, at your cost, at your whatever. Yes, you get in the way, but you're collateral damage. You're not the target always. You're not the one that they're seeking out to destroy always. Okay? Sometimes you are. Sometimes, yes, and especially with the case of people like psychopaths, sociopaths, which the DSM qualifies as antisocial behaviour or something. But we call it psychopathy or sociopathy. They're a lot more impulsive. They're a lot more cold and emotionless. So they have a lot less. It's not so much that they're in a panicky, jittery mode, that they're concealing some insecurity with a mask, and they have this elevated sense of self. For them, it's more just a hollowness. It's not, they haven't the elevated sense of self. It's just there isn't really one there. They just do whatever they feel like doing. So they more likely will know exactly what they're doing and will be deliberately taking advantage of you, seeing you as a tool to meet their ends. Narcissists, sometimes yes, but a lot of the time, and especially with the more vulnerable narcissists, they are just they're manipulating on autopilot. That they're not aware that they're doing it because they're so just focused on keeping up appearances, keeping their inflated sense of self from being discovered, from being outed, from having the finger pointed at them, from being exposed as a fraud. One of the biggest fears that they have. So they're so focused on that most of the time for most people that they have no idea what they're doing to you. And in my case, I don't hate these people. Like it doesn't help me to hate narcissists. Okay. Even if they did know what they're doing, it doesn't really help me to hate the narcissist, because the only person who is affected by hate is the one who does the hating. So I choose not to do that, which is quite hard, especially when, number 7, they lack empathy. Okay, so this is something that's common to all of the the mental disorders listed in what's called Cluster B, which is, we can read a bit of that as well. Like if you go straight up to Cluster B, where is it? Cluster B personality disorders. Where is the it starts with antisocial, but for the most part, okay, no, I will have to come back to that. We'll come back to that one, but they all share this trait to some degree. They lack empathy. Now, the psychopaths may have none at all, and may not just struggle, but be completely incapable of understanding what somebody else is feeling, or even aware that other people have feelings. That because they don't feel guilt or shame, they have nothing to reference it against. It's not possible for them to conceive of something they've never experienced. So why should anybody else have guilt and shame? They've heard the words but have no idea what it means. Whereas narcissists, they feel very I was going to say richly, but they feel in extremes. They have a very vivid emotional state, but it's just very warped, and a lot of the emotional triggers and the emotional regulation that's supposed to happen during childhood and adolescence just hasn't happened for people with narcissistic personality disorder, which is why you start to see it come out during adolescence or early adulthood, usually around 15. It's diagnosable, I guess you could say. because really this lack of empathy, like if you look at children, right? Children, somebody said to me recently, aren't children very narcissistic? And it's like, no, they're not. Children aren't narcissistic. They're selfish. Children are inherently self-interested. And I think to a large degree, most people actually are. We're self-interested. We are going to look out for ourselves. Children just haven't learned empathy yet. It's something that we do have to learn. We do have to learn to recognize your feelings, to understand them, and then understand that other people have feelings too, and might then relate to other people and understand how they're feeling. Narcissists never learned that. They never developed that emotional mirror where they can reflect emotional states genuinely back at other people. A lot of them have become quite good at faking it, by faking expressions, by faking body language or tones of voice, fear or guilt or shame or apologies. They can make it, a narcissist apology is like the gas station sushi. It looks great, but you're going to regret it later. It's not genuine. It's not real sushi. It's sickening when you actually start to ingest it, because it's not a real apology. It's not real empathy. It's not real caring. It's just a mask, a visor. I can click down. There's a couple other points then. Number 8, often envious of others and believes that others are envious of him or her. So this, I suppose, comes hand in hand with being, with thinking yourself superior to other people and thinking yourself much better or greater than other people. If I am more beautiful, then naturally other people are going to be jealous of me, right? Like they want to be just as beautiful as I am, or as intelligent as me, or as skilled and gifted as I am. So that kind of goes hand in hand with that. And the DSM actually, like when you scroll down, goes on a little bit more about this 1.8. What else do they say? Envious of others, believe others are envious of them, blah, blah, blah. They may begrudge others their successes or possessions, feeling that they are better, deserve those achievements, admiration, or privileges. They may harshly devalue the contributions of others, particularly when those individuals have received acknowledgement or praise for their accomplishments. So, especially as is the case with vulnerable narcissists, I'll say, they're much more likely to attach themselves to special people than actually be special themselves. And this is because the vulnerable narcissist's totalistic vision of themselves is wildly different from collective perception, from what most people think, or reality, right? They believe they're super hot, but reality, they're like a 2 out of 10. Or they believe they're super smart, but they can't even do a basic maths equation. So they will attach themselves to somebody who is like that and use them and work through them and manipulate these people to perform through them. And they will, of course, develop a serious envy or a resentment of that individual for being better than they reasonably are, or at least being, their victim would be better than people are treating the narcissist as. And so they're kind of going to compete for attention between themselves and their victim. It's quite fascinating to watch, actually. Number 9, the final one, right, shows arrogant or haughty behaviors or attitudes. Man, I love that word, haughty. So, it brings to mind the images of like, these stick thin women in manor houses. There's the the type. Arrogance, haughty behaviors. I am so much more than a gift. That's the attitude that these people exude. Like they might. Here we go. They might actually. There's an example given here, right? They might complain about the clumsy waiter's rudeness or stupidity, or conclude a medical evaluation with a condescending evaluation of the physician. That's quite a good one. Conclude a medical evaluation with a condescending evaluation of the physician. Oh, well, he thought I had this problem, but what does he know? He's only a silly physician. Which actually, well, that's another conversation. But you get the point. Haughtiness and carrying yourself with this air of, snobbery and disdain and looking down your nose on people. And the more grandiose ones can definitely be like that, but it's people don't care if they're beautiful or they're really intelligent anyway, and they'll overlook the haughtiness and just see it as, oh wow, they're confident. And who doesn't love a confident person? If someone's real confident, then they've got a huge following and they don't have to work too hard for their narcissistic supply anyway. Okay, so those are the 9 criteria, and there's a diagnostic features thing which goes down there. But hopefully, I've given a few good examples and sort of elaborated on what the DSM says. It's actually a pretty good metric for gauging it. But if you can remember those 8 criteria, in fact, no. Do you know if you can remember the 2 most important ones? Which is the grandiose sense of self-importance. This is the what I call the narcissistic delusion. They think themselves here, but in reality, there's somewhere underneath that. Be it quite close underneath it, but still they have this elevated sense of self-importance, or whether there's a massive gap. It doesn't really matter. They have to have that sense of self-importance. And the other is the attention addiction. If they have this excessive need for validation, affirmation, acceptance, clapping, applause, gifts. I dated a girl recently who we got talking about the love languages, the ways in which people give and receive love. And it's quite interesting, but she said, mine is all of them. I give and receive love in all of these ways, and I need it kind of all the time. And that was a pretty big red flag. So I was like, oh, it's really, it's very difficult for someone, if you were to be dating this individual for any longer than I did, if you were to be dating them, then you would really, really struggle to keep up with that need for validation, need for constant attention, because it's just all of them all the time. It's gifts and time spent with them and compliments all the time and constantly being within, physical contact of them. And it's going to run you dry. You're going to lose yourself. You're going to lose yourself in that relationship, because all of your time, all of your mental energy is going to be going into making sure that their needs and their emotions are all being taken care of. So what I wanted to do next, and by all means, if you're actually watching this and you're enjoying it, you're finding it interesting, and you can get over my maybe fast talking, then drop a comment in below. Let me know what you think, whether you've had any experiences with narcissists before. Let me know. So I got such a dry throat. I'm gonna need to keep a bottle of water or something nearby for the next one of these. But no, sorry. Let me know in the comments, and let's have a chat. Let's start talking. Let's see what you're interested in or what your experience has been, and maybe we can start a cool conversation in the comments and start making some progress. Right. So I wanted to talk next about one of the cluster C personality disorders. Okay, and these are categorized slightly different. They're more of a damage to themselves than they are to other people. Not that they can't be a damage to other people, but it's a very much inward facing trouble that they face, whereas well, I suppose it's also the same for narcissism, but the way that they respond to that, when you talk about narcissists or you talk about psychopaths, it's very sort of explosive outwardly. The damage done is exterior, whereas when you look at the category C, cluster C personality disorders, they're a lot more inwards damaging. So let's take a look at, I'm going to just focus on one, I think, for this session. It's called dependent personality disorder. Okay, and the reason I want to talk about this one is because when you look at some of these criteria here, they're actually very, they're almost the antithesis of narcissistic personality disorder. These people, if you come across an individual, or perhaps you suffer from some of these symptoms yourself, it is going to make you a prime target, a delicious snack for some of these narcissists that are out there. You become a walking target when you have, really it's three things. It's ignorance. If you simply don't know, you don't know how to recognize narcissism and recognize attempts to lie to you, to mislead you, to guess people's ulterior motives, to have that sort of psychological street smarts, that's going to make you a big target. The other is emotional dysregulation. If you're not able to understand what you're feeling and translate that into actions that benefit you, you're going to have a really hard time navigating and understanding relationships in general. And the chances of you attracting a narcissistic individual is going to be probably a bit higher. And the third thing is as well is you carry some real benefit to them. So if you yourself are a high status individual, if you're a celebrity, and don't pretend to think that some of the first people to my channel are going to be A-list celebs, but if you have the ear of an authority, or you are some authority in some field, or you're a CEO, or you're very successful, or you yourself are very beautiful, or you're very intelligent and very smart and very witty and funny, and you're doing comedy shows on the weekends, with packed audiences, this is going to be very attractive to a narcissist to want to buddy up with you, and potentially even then start a relationship with you. Be this, it could be a friendship, it can be an intimate relationship, or perhaps even as well that it could be your mother, your father, or an uncle, that you grew up with. There's plenty of, there's no shortage of examples out there of mothers of children, pushing them out into the limelight to make these kids go up on stage, child star, child celebrity, and then the mother steps in and gets the benefit and gets the glory and gets the, here's the haughtiness comes in, the haughtiness. Oh, my daughter is this and that and the other, and my daughter's this and blah blah blah. So you see that, but ultimately the second point that I mentioned there, the emotional dysregulation really comes into play when you start looking at the cluster C personalities and you start looking at dependent personality disorder in particular. So let's go through this and see what you guys have to think. Right, so a pervasive and excessive need to be taken care of that leads to submissive and clinging behavior and fears of separation beginning in early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts, as indicated by 5 or more of the following criteria, and we'll go through them. But first, I just want to call out here an excessive need to be taken care of. Now, when you think about a narcissist who one of their main criteria is this heightened sense of self-importance and needing to be recognized as being, so the authority, and having somebody constantly providing you with that sort of attention, then they sort of fit like a hand in a glove here with somebody who has this excessive and unstoppable need to be taken care of and to be submissive and to cling. That's a never-ending supply of attention right there. So it's a narcissist's dream come true. So the first one here, and again, I think it's possibly one of the big ones, the most important ones. Somebody with dependent personality has difficulty making everyday decisions without excessive amounts of advice and reassurance from others. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't even have to be specific people. It just has to be other people in the environment. If it's in a work environment, this person is going around, what do you think about this? Do you think we should do this? What about this? What about that? Should we do this? And it needs to be all the time. Come back to you 3 or 4 times and ask again, are you sure this is the action we could take? Are you 100% positive? That's another, listen for things like that. Are we 100% sure this is going to work out okay? Are we going to be all right here? Number 2, needs others to assume responsibility for most major areas of his or her life in some way. Okay, and it says here for most major areas of her life, although I've met dependents before who are happy enough to manage areas of their life, that especially when they've been doing these things for a long time and they're comfortable with it, but especially where you get into adulthood and they start changing, it becomes that sort of pervasive fear and need to be taken care of sort of comes in, and it's partners of dependents often become their caregiver, and I think this is the thing to look out for here. The partner will become more of like the mother or the father, and if you look a little deeper, it gets even a little bit more sort of, I suppose, creepy, in that at the end of the day they're kind of dating their dad or dating their mum, and that's the situation that dependents feel most at ease in. They have difficulty expressing disagreement because of fear of loss of support or approval. They need everybody to like them. They absolutely have this fear that everybody has to like them. They can't let anybody down. That's a big one, and that can come across in many ways as well. Just they're more likely, right, that a dependent is more likely to go along with the crowd and go along with something that they know to be wrong and that they shouldn't do it. They know full well this is the wrong thing, we shouldn't do it, but they'll go along with it because because they don't want to lose the help of the people that they're looking for guidance. They're relying on people for help. They're dependent, and there's the word, right? They're dependent on these people for help, and the fear is that if they disagree with these people, that they're going to then stop helping them, and they will more likely then to just agree, just to be a yes man, to be a people pleaser, just go along. Yeah, okay, we'll do that, even if they know it's wrong. And they don't really get angry. They don't really, But there's something down here. Where is this? They don't get angry at others who support and nurture their need for fear of alienating them. If the individual's concerns regarding the consequences of expressing disagreement are realistic, the behavior should not be considered to be evidence of the personality disorder. Okay, that I didn't highlight that bit, but we can go back to the list. Right. Okay. Has difficulty initiating projects or doing things on his or her own because of a lack of self-confidence in judgment or abilities, rather than a lack of motivation or energy. So they've got plenty of motivation, plenty of energy, plenty of want and desire, but just almost a complete absence of confidence in their ability to be able to handle any situations that befall them. And so what you'll see dependents do a lot of the time is pour a lot of energy and effort into trying to create plans and calculated steps to avoid every worst case scenario, and every bad thing that could possibly happen needs a plan that needs to be approved and has the acceptance of all of the people that they're going to rely on to help execute those plans. There's the fear that, or uncomfortableness that they get from the threat of helplessness. That if they get into trouble, if something happens, then they're going to be helpless. They're not going to be able to handle the situation. They don't have any confidence that they're going to be able to handle the situation. And so this is not just it's not just a fear either. It's an excessive fear. It's a paralyzing fear that they are going to be left alone, or there's almost a fear of abandonment there as well. But that they're going to be left alone without any help, that people are going to be pointing fingers at them, and they're not going to be able to handle it. Okay? So, a lot of the time as well, they urgently, here we go, number 7, urgently seeks another relationship as a source of care and support when a close relationship ends. So yeah, this is what I was saying earlier about the partner becoming like the mother or the father figure. So when the relationship ends, they're the worst sorts of people at being single. They have to be in a relationship, and this is actually very similar as well to narcissistic personality, because with a narcissistic personality, they will monkey branch between one relationship and another. And you know how monkeys will swing over between the vines. They're not like letting go with both of their arms and flinging themselves from one vine to the next. They will reach out one arm, keeping one hand on the old vine, grab the next one, and only when they have a firm grip on the next vine are they then going to let go of the old one and move on. And this is what narcissists will do typically with their relationships. They're not going to move on from one relationship to the next unless they have secured the next relationship first as a constant supply of attention and validation, right? They're like leeches. They need a host. They need the blood supply, the lifeblood, the life essence, which is this addiction to attention, this constant need for validation, affirmation, etc., etc. And so they're not good at being single either, but because they don't have that supply, they won't be single for very long. And it's the same for dependence, except that it's not a aggressive addiction to attention that they suffer from. It's a fear of having to kind of look after themselves, or an incapability of caring for themselves, and a need to have somebody else look after them, essentially. I mean, they are here. It says their belief that they are unable to function in the absence of a close relationship motivates them to become quickly and indiscriminately attached to another individual. So bonds happen really quickly for dependence and narcissistic personality. You might have heard of a trauma bond, which is essentially a huge and overwhelming flood of emotions at the beginning of a new relationship that is formed on shared trauma. It's where you admit to having some form of complication in your childhood, or some horrible experience that has affected you emotionally, that has changed you spiritually or psychologically, and your prospective partner does the same thing. Then it's very easy for those two individuals to feel a connection based on the fact that they both have shared trauma. They feel this kind of connection. Oh, you did what I did, and I did what you did, and now this sort of thing, and you see it a lot in action movies where the action hero saves the damsel and they go through some horrible experience, some, guys with guns and falling off buildings and crashing helicopters, and they make it out by the skin of their teeth, and then they fall in love, and they have they have a beautiful kiss at the end of it. But the unfortunate truth is, at the end of the movie, they don't stay together. They don't have a happy family. They don't have kids. They don't go on to live happily ever after. Why? Because they've not formed a real relationship. They've bonded over a shared trauma. Yeah, in the movies, it's all about helicopters and action and guns and running. But in real life, it's very boring, but it does happen. My father wasn't in my life, and I grew up without a dad, and then someone else says, oh well, my parents died when I was 10, and blah blah blah, and oh my god, we both grew up without parents. And what this will lead to is this trauma bond. It will lead to this quasi love, this quasi feeling of a relationship, but it's not. It's an attachment. It's a bond. It's a like a gripping claw. They grip on and they hold tight. And dependents do it to have somebody there to provide care and support that they need, and that they fall apart without. Ultimately, they believe that they're not, as it says here, they're not able to function without it. So when they're in a relationship, there's always a fear that individual is going to leave. And so it drives the dependent to comply very readily with the demands of the person caring for them. Doesn't have to be a narcissist. It won't always be a narcissist. But in those sort of relationships, you've got somebody who's very willing to obey and to keep things okay, and then you've got somebody up here who is going to demand obedience, who's going to demand that they have special privileges, special treatment, and the dependent is going to give it. The dependent is going to provide that. So the last thing we'll say here is that people with this dependent personality are so preoccupied with the fear of being left to care for themselves that they see. In fact, you know what? Before I do that, let's read out the sentence I highlighted down here. So there's an example, right? They give a quite good example, actually, the DSM-5. I'll read this out. For example, an elderly man with cancer who moves into his son's household for care is exhibiting dependent behavior that is appropriate given the person's life circumstances. So this is not dependent personality, because this dude, because he's old, he genuinely needs care. He genuinely does need help, and he is going to rely on his son in order to provide that care and support and attention. And even in the case of an elderly man with cancer, right, he very well may fear not being able to be cared for. In fact, my grandmother was in a very similar position where she genuinely had this fear that she'd get into trouble or that something would happen, and she didn't have a plan, and she didn't have the approval from the people that were looking after her in the facility that she was in at the time. So she had a very real fear, but it was justified. The difference between something like that and dependent personality is that those fears do not have any grounds. There's no grounds for this person to fear being abandoned. There's no grounds for this person to fear being left to handle a situation that they don't have the skills to do. It is all an imagined delusion. It is all the delusion that they can't cope. So on one hand, you have narcissists who are attention addicts and have a delusion of greatness, that they have some great power, some enormous beauty and some great skilled individual, and they're going to demand obedience. They're going to demand that you treat them with special privileges and see them as they see themselves, and they will resort to very underhanded manipulative tactics in order to get it there, whether they realize it or not. And then on the other hand, you have the near perfect victim for a narcissist, which is the dependent, which is somebody who is so willing to go along with what they believe to be wrong in an effort to be cared for, in order to have somebody there to look after them. They will obey, they will follow, they will go along with what you need, they will provide you with the constant the clinging and the behavior and the attention that the narcissist so desperately craves. Okay? Now, it's not to say that a dependent will always get into a relationship with a narcissist, or that a narcissist will always get into a relationship with a dependent. Okay? It can happen. A dependent can get into a relationship with another dependent and form codependence, both clinging to each other, both trying to look after each other. One person looks after the person A looks after person B looks after person A, and instead of actually just looking after themselves as a well-adjusted, well-emotionally regulated adult would, they've both become each other's parent in a way, right? That's called codependence. And that is an especially unfortunate, challenging, difficult place to break free from. Okay, so hopefully this has been quite insightful and maybe interesting and exciting. It definitely was thirsty work, I'll tell you that. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a few more like this, a few more deep dives. We're going to look at some of the the detail around narcissistic personality, some of the things that you can do to break free from that. And all the time, I welcome you all to just put some stuff in the comments. Comment on the content. Let me know what you liked. Let me know what worked for you, what you found interesting, and of course, let me know on the delivery and the style and the production as well. You know, I'm going to be improving those as we progress and as I start to produce more videos and better quality videos. Because, as I said, I think at the start of this take, this stuff is important. You got to know this stuff. If you haven't had any sort of known experience with a narcissist, you've not come in close contact with one or spent any degree of time with one, you probably won't seek this information out. We're not taught it from a young age. So we only seem to start to pick this up and start to learn this stuff after we've been affected by it. And at that point, the damage has been done. So that is why you'll see on my banner, if you look above, it says discover, defend, recover, because that is the progress that you guys, if you have come in contact with a narcissist or spent a degree of time with them, are going to be going on. You'll be at a stage where you're trying to learn everything. Either you're still in the relationship with them and you're starting to question things and you think, actually, this isn't right. This isn't normal. I'm basically burning out. I don't even know who I am anymore. All of my hobbies are in the cupboard and I'm struggling to keep up with this person, and you know, I'm worried that they're going to go off and you know, either leave me or cheat on me, or maybe they're in your office and they're threatening your career, you know, and you're starting to wonder and question. That's what the discover portion is all about, and I hope to share a whole boatload of information with you guys on this channel so that you can understand not just the narcissist, not just cults, not just mind control and thought reform, right? There's so much content out there at the moment of people talking about this stuff. You've got a ton of options. But I also am going to talk to you about the psyche of the victims, the people that they target, the people that they affect. When you join a cult, you don't join, you're recruited. And it's because of something that's happening in your head psychologically or in your being that allows that to happen. And it's the same thing with narcissists, psychopaths. There's something going on in your mind too. And you will rarely find people talking about that. But look, it's absolutely critical to understand what's going inside you in order to do the next two stages of discover, defend, and recover. Defend, of course, being to protect yourself. And this means not just from the psychological techniques. To actually learn to recognize these things is the first step, but then actually knowing what the steps are to put boundaries in place, knowing what the steps are to start to emotionally regulate yourself. It's called emotional self-regulation, and it is something that all victims of narcissistic personality, and that is to say that the people they affect, they all suffer from emotional dysregulation. And to learn to self-regulate, to control and understand and work through your own emotions is a skill that we have to learn as part of the defend stage. But it goes more than that. We also go into actually leaving toxic relationships safely, because when you start to put boundaries in place, as I said earlier, you'll raise red flags to the narcissist. They'll see that as a threat and they'll respond accordingly. So leaving a relationship is one thing, leaving it safely is another. Okay, and then once it's ended, whether it's a romantic relationship, a sexual relationship, a workplace relationship, a parental relationship, or a cult, and you're in a group, maybe it's a religious group, maybe it's a political one, then recovery can only begin after the relationship has ended and as much distance has been put between you and your manipulator as possible. And at that point, recovery is going to be a little different to most of the self-improvement content that you have available at your fingertips on YouTube, on Twitter, on Instagram. It's not as simple as just going to the gym and bench pressing your way out of several years of trauma. It is going to take a little bit longer than that, and a little bit more effort, I should say. Some wounds you can't just leave up to time, and I say this a lot to people that I talk to about this. Time is not the greatest healer. It's not the healer that you think it is. Some wounds need to be stitched and sutured. And emotional wounds are exactly the same. Some psychological and emotional wounds cut deep, that you only start to pick apart the damage that it's caused in stages. And we'll cover what those stages are and how to recover from each of them, and what my experience has been doing the same thing. And of course, helping others through their journeys after their relationships have collapsed or are collapsing. So we'll go through what those stages are, through from before the relationship ends to when the relationship ends, to creating that distance, to starting to recover physically, because if you spend any amount of time with a narcissist, you'll know that they have effects on your health, they have effects on your money and your finances, and securing them is going to be a big part of recovery. And on all of your relationships as well. One of the things that narcissists typically do is they cut off threats to their control over you. And a lot of the time, especially where the relationship is a romantic relationship, it's family members. They'll make it so that you cut your family members off. And so you're going to have damaged relationships with family, with friends, with co-workers, colleagues. And when you leave one of these sorts of relationships, depending on how long or how close you were with the individual, you may leave with no real support network left at all. So that can be a challenge to overcome. And then as you progress and as you start to feel better physically, financially, you're recovering, emotionally, you're starting to self-regulate, and your relationships are starting to build back up again, you'll start to notice that there are more social problems that might bubble to the surface, or some emotional problems, or even addictions as well, can be quite common amongst people that have suffered narcissistic abuse, because of how the narcissist affects your psyche, your identity, your values, your beliefs, your emotions, behaviors. All of it ultimately stems from you and your sense of self and how you see yourself. Then that can lead to addictive tendencies as a coping mechanism for the uncertainty, for the damage that it did to those deeper parts of your psyche, and they can bubble up in other parts of your life, in your relationships most obviously, but also physically in terms of addiction. And so those things are a little harder to work through, but one of the things I'm going to be doing, or would hope to do, is try to make it a bit more fun, a bit more engaging, a bit lighthearted, because the trauma itself, look, it's awful, it's terrible, it's not something that you can put into words that somebody who hasn't experienced that is going to be able to understand or relate to. But the recovery does not have to be as doom and gloom as that. In fact, the recovery should be fun. It should be exciting. It should be a bit more, a bit more silly, a bit more, silly-goosery. So we're going to be doing that. We'll be gamifying things. I also write music, so we're going to be bringing in some creative aspects as well, because creativity is one of the best ways in which you can recover. And if you think about it, you can't design a life on your own terms without a bit of creativity in there. You've got to have a bit of imagination if you want to actually do some designing, So that's what we're going to be accomplishing on the channel. This is one of those first steps at the discovery stage. It's critical base information that you guys absolutely have to know if you want to start learning and discovering a bit more about narcissistic control. Do give us a follow, subscribe, and as I said, jump into the comments and let me know what you thought of this video. Let me know what you thought of the tech, the setup, and everything as well. I could always do with some pointers as to how to make this content better for you and more engaging, so that you don't fall asleep in the middle of my video. Okay, we'll leave it there. Have a lovely evening. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, take care of yourself, and I'll see you on the next one. Take it easy. Bye-bye.